The November rain painted Seattle in shades of silver and shadow as Tessa Monroe stepped from the taxi, her weathered medical bag clutched against her chest. Before her rose the Chrome Tower, a monument of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. Inside lived a man the world once celebrated, now choosing isolation over acclaim. She had read the file 3 times. Nathan Cross, 36, former neurosurgeon turned tech innovator, founder of MedTech Solutions. The accident 18 months ago had damaged the nerves in his right hand, ending his surgical career and beginning his retreat from the world. The file mentioned depression, resistance to treatment, and a revolving door of caregivers who never lasted more than 2 weeks. Tessa had taken difficult cases before. She understood that healing required more than medical knowledge. It demanded patience, empathy, and the willingness to see beyond what people showed the world. The first encounter, the elevator rose silently, carrying her toward the 50th floor. When the doors opened, she entered a space that felt more like an art installation than a home. Everything was white, chrome, or glass. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawling below, rain streaming down like tears on an invisible face. Nathan stood near the windows, his back to her. He wore dark clothes that made him seem like a shadow against the light. His posture was rigid, controlled, as though he had forgotten how to relax. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cross," Tessa said, keeping her voice gentle but professional. He turned slowly. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and guarded eyes the color of storm clouds. His right hand hung at his side, fingers curled slightly inward. "You must be the new therapist," he said. His voice carried no warmth, no welcome. "How long do you think you will last?" The bluntness might have stung if she had not expected it. "As long as it takes," she replied. His eyebrow lifted slightly. "They all say that. Perhaps I mean it." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or challenge. He gestured toward the living area. "Dr. Hayes left your contract on the table. The rules are clear. Follow them, and we will manage. Break them, and you leave immediately. Rules and boundaries." Tessa, read through the document carefully. The rules were specific and revealing. Do not ask about the accident. Do not enter the West Wing study. Do not attempt physical contact without permission. Meals at scheduled times. Professional distance maintained at all times. These are not just rules, she thought. These are walls. She signed without hesitation. When she looked up, Nathan was watching her with an intensity that made the vast room feel suddenly smaller. "You agreed quickly," he observed. "Because I understand boundaries," she said. "But I hope you understand that healing requires trust, not just distance." His jaw tightened. "I hired you for physical therapy, Miss Monroe, not psychological analysis. One often requires the other, Mr. Cross." He turned away, dismissing her. "Your room is down the east hallway. Dinner is at 7. Do not be late." Small observations over the following days, Tessa settled into the rhythm of the penthouse. She woke early, prepared breakfast, and waited for Nathan in the therapy room he had created in the south wing. The sessions were tense, filled with clinical instructions and careful movements as she guided exercises meant to restore function to his damaged hand. He never complained about pain, though she saw it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his breath would catch when a particular movement stressed the injured nerves. His control was absolute, his emotions locked away behind layers of discipline. But Tessa was trained to observe. She noticed the untouched piano in the corner, its surface dusty. She saw how he avoided mirrors, how his left hand compensated constantly for what his right could no longer do. She found medical journals stacked high, each one marked with notes in precise handwriting that grew shakier toward the margins. One evening, she prepared tea and left it on the table near where he stood by the windows. He glanced at it, then at her. "I did not ask for this," he said. "Consider it an observation," she replied. "You have not eaten since breakfast. That is not your concern. Actually, Mr. Cross, your overall health is exactly my concern." Nerve recovery requires proper nutrition. He stared at her for a long moment, then picked up the cup. The gesture felt like a victory, small but significant, the sound of breaking late one night. Unable to sleep, Tessa heard a sound from the forbidden West Wing. Not music, but something breaking. Glass, perhaps, or ceramic? Then, silence, heavy and complete. She stood in the hallway, torn between respecting his rules and responding to what sounded like distress. Before she could decide, Nathan emerged from the study. His right hand bleeding from a small cut, he stopped when he saw her. His expression unreadable. "You should be asleep," he said, "and you should let me help with that." She replied, nodding toward his hand. For once, he did not argue. He followed her to the kitchen, where she cleaned and bandaged the wound with gentle efficiency. His skin was warm under her fingers, and she felt the slight tremor that never quite left him. "What broke?" she asked softly. "My patience," he said. Then, quieter, a cup. I could not hold it properly. The frustration in his voice was raw, unfiltered. For the first time, she was seeing past the controlled exterior to the man beneath. The one who mourned everything he had lost. "Healing is not linear, Mr. Cross," she said. "Some days will be harder than others." He looked at her then, really looked, as though searching for something he had forgotten existed. Understanding, perhaps, or simply kindness without judgment. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "The others all left when they realized I was not getting better fast enough. Because better is not the only measure of progress," she said. "Sometimes just continuing is enough." The silence that followed felt different. Less like a wall, more like a breath being held. When Tessa returned to her room that night, she found a note slipped under her door. 3 words in that same precise handwriting. "Thank you." Tessa. It was the first time he had used her name. Outside, the rain continued its endless conversation with the glass, and somewhere in the vast penthouse, 2 wounded souls had taken the smallest step toward each other. Morning light filtered through the rain-streaked windows as Tessa prepared breakfast in the expansive kitchen. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival. The penthouse felt marginally less like a museum and more like a place where people actually lived. Nathan still maintained his distance, but the silences between them had softened, becoming almost comfortable. She heard the elevator chime and turned, surprised. Nathan rarely had visitors, and none were scheduled for today. The doors opened, and a small figure stepped out, accompanied by Dr. Victoria Hayes. The boy was perhaps 8 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes identical to Nathan's stormy gray. He clutched a backpack against his chest, like armor, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. Nathan appeared from the hallway, his expression shifting through several emotions before settling on something carefully neutral. "Oliver," he said quietly. "Welcome home." The boy said nothing. He did not even look up. Dr. Hayes caught Tessa's eye and gestured toward the living area. "Nathan, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Oliver, this is Tessa. She has been helping your father. Perhaps she could show you to your room?" Tessa knelt down slowly, making herself smaller, less threatening. "Hello, Oliver. I am Tessa. Your room has a wonderful view of the city. Would you like to see it?" The boy's fingers tightened on his backpack straps. After a long moment, he gave the smallest nod. The language of Silent Solver's room was in the east wing, decorated in soft blues and grays. Tessa opened the curtains, revealing the sprawling cityscape below. The boy moved to the window and stood there, silent and still. "You do not have to talk if you do not want to," Tessa said gently. "Sometimes silence says more than words anyway." She left a plate of cookies on the desk and quietly exited. In the hallway, she could hear Dr. Hayes speaking with Nathan in low, urgent tones. "He has not spoken since the funeral," Victoria said. "The child psychologist thinks being here with you might help, but Nathan, you have to actually engage with him. You cannot hide from your own son." "I am not hiding," Nathan replied, his voice strained. "I am protecting him." "From what? From life? From connection? He needs his father. Not a ghost who happens to live in the same house, Their conversation faded as they moved deeper into the apartment. Tessa stood outside Oliver's door for a moment, thinking about the two people inside this glass tower, both imprisoned by grief neither knew how to express, building bridges with small gestures over the following days. Tessa developed a routine around Oliver. She left meals outside his door with small notes. No pressure, just fuel. She placed art supplies on the coffee table in the living room, saying nothing when she noticed drawings appearing there. Images of rain and tall buildings and shadowy figures. Nathan watched from a distance, uncertain and clearly struggling. During their therapy sessions, his concentration wavered. "You are worried about him," Tessa observed one afternoon as she guided his hand through resistance exercises. "He does not speak to me," Nathan said. "He barely looks at me." Children process grief differently than adults. He is not rejecting you. He is trying to understand a world that suddenly makes no sense, and I am supposed to help him with that? Nathan's voice carried a bitter edge. "I can barely understand it myself." "Then perhaps you figure it out together." That evening, Tessa found Nathan standing outside Oliver's room, his hand raised to knock, but frozen in hesitation. She watched as he lowered his hand and walked away, shoulders tight with defeat. The first breakthrough, Tessa decided to try something different. She brought out an old telescope she had found in storage and set it up near the living room windows. When Oliver emerged for dinner, moving like a shadow along the walls, she was adjusting the focus. "The clouds cleared tonight," she said conversationally, not looking at him directly. "I thought it might be nice to see the stars. They are harder to spot in the city, but if you know where to look, they are still there." Oliver paused. His curiosity was visible in the slight tilt of his head. "Would you like to try?" Tessa asked. Slowly, the boy approached. She stepped back, giving him space. Oliver peered through the eyepiece, and for the first time since arriving, his posture relaxed slightly. Nathan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the unfamiliar sound of movement in the common areas. He watched his son at the telescope, something raw and hopeful crossing his features. "There is Orion," Tessa said softly, pointing upward through the glass. "See those 3 stars in a row? That is his belt. My father used to show me constellations when I was young. He said they were proof that even in darkness, there is always light if you look for it." Oliver's hand reached out, fingers tracing the invisible lines between stars on the window glass. Nathan moved closer, careful and quiet. "I used to look at stars too," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before medical school, before everything got complicated, your mother and I would drive out of the city just to see them properly." It was the first time he had mentioned Oliver's mother in the boy's presence. Tessa held her breath. Oliver turned slowly, looking at his father for the first time with something other than blank detachment. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. Nathan knelt down, bringing himself to his son's level. "I know I have not been the father you needed these past months," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I got lost in my own sadness and forgot you were lost too. But I am here now, Oliver. I am right here." The boy's lower lip trembled. Then, in a movement so sudden, it startled them both, Oliver rushed forward and wrapped his arms around Nathan's neck, burying his face against his father's shoulder. Nathan's arms came up instinctively, holding his son close. His right hand shook as it pressed against Oliver's back, but he did not let go. They stayed like that. Two people finding each other again in the ruins of their shared grief. Tessa quietly stepped back, giving them privacy. She returned to the kitchen, her own eyes damp, and began preparing hot chocolate. Something warm and sweet for a night of small miracles. Slow healing. The days that followed brought gradual changes. Oliver still did not speak, but he began joining them for meals. He would sit beside his father, sometimes showing him drawings, sometimes just existing in the same space without fear. Nathan transformed as well. The rigid control softened into something more genuine. He smiled more, laughed occasionally at Oliver's antics, and even played simple games in the evenings. During therapy sessions, his progress improved. Not because his hand was healing faster, but because he had found a reason to keep trying. One afternoon, Tessa found them on the floor of the living room, building an elaborate city from blocks. Nathan's damaged hands struggled with the smaller pieces. But Oliver patiently handed him larger ones, adapting without judgment. "Thank you," Nathan said to Tessa later after Oliver had gone to bed. "For seeing what I could not. You love him," she replied. "You just forgot how to show it. Love does not disappear, Mr. Cross. It just gets buried sometimes under everything else." He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "And what about you, Tessa? What have you buried?" The question caught her off guard. She thought of her sister, of the hospital room, of the surgeon who had tried and failed to save her. That grief lived in her still, a constant companion she had learned to carry. "Everyone has ghosts," she said finally. "The important thing is not letting them haunt you forever. Is that what I have been doing? Haunting myself?" Perhaps we both have been. The air between them felt charged with unspoken understanding. Nathan took a step closer, and Tessa's breath caught. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her. But instead he simply said, "I am glad you stayed." "So am I," she whispered, outside. The city lights reflected off the rain-soaked glass, and somewhere in the distance, stars hid behind clouds, waiting patiently to be seen again. 6 weeks into her stay, Tessa had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost like home. The penthouse no longer seemed cold and sterile. Oliver's drawings decorated the refrigerator. Nathan's rare smiles had become more frequent. Even the forbidden West Wing study had been opened. Revealing a workspace filled with medical research and half-finished projects, Nathan was slowly returning too. But something had been nagging at Tessa, a familiarity she could not place. The way Nathan described certain medical procedures, the specific hospital he referenced in passing. The timeline of when he had stopped practicing surgery. It all aligned with something painful in her own past. One evening, while organizing therapy files, she found a box tucked behind medical supplies in the storage closet. Inside were old identification badges, commendations, and photographs from Nathan's surgical career. Her hands trembled as she lifted one particular image. St. Catherine's Hospital, 2019. A surgical team posed in blue scrubs, Nathan among them, younger and unmarked by tragedy. Behind them, partially visible through an operating room window, was a patient on a table. The date stamped in the corner matched exactly. The photograph slipped from her fingers. That was the day her sister died. Confronting the past, Tessa sat on the floor of the storage room, her mind spinning through memories she had tried to bury. Melody had been 23, vibrant, and full of plans. The aneurysm had come without warning. The emergency surgery had been her only chance. The surgeon had been skilled, everyone said, one of the best. But sometimes skill was not enough. She had never learned his name. She had been too devastated, too angry at the universe to ask for details. She had simply fled from medicine, from hospitals, from anything that reminded her of that sterile room where hope had died. And now she lived in his home, cared for his child, had begun to feel things she had no right to feel. "Tessa," Nathan's voice came from the hallway. "Are you all right? You missed dinner." She looked up as he appeared in the doorway, concern etched across his features. The moment he saw the photograph in her hand, his face went pale. "Where did you find that?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Her voice sounded distant, even to her own ears. "You were there. St. Catherine's. March 15th, 2019. He closed his eyes. "Yes. My sister died that day." "Melody Rodriguez. She was your patient." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 6 years of grief colliding with 6 weeks of tentative connection. Nathan sank down against the doorframe, suddenly looking exhausted. "I remember her," he said. "She told me about her sister before the anesthesia. Said you were studying to be a nurse? Said you had the kindest heart she had ever known." Tessa's vision blurred with tears. "What happened?" "The aneurysm was worse than the imaging showed. When we tried to clip it, the vessel wall was too weak. It ruptured. We tried everything, Tessa. Every technique I knew. But there was too much bleeding, too much damage. I lost her." His voice broke on the last words. Tessa saw tears on his face, the first she had ever witnessed from him. When grief meets grief, she should have been angry. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to blame him for the loss that had reshaped her entire life. But looking at Nathan, seeing his anguish, she understood something she had not before. He had carried this too. Every patient he had lost had left a mark, and Melody had been one of many weights he bore. After she died, Nathan continued, his voice raw, I threw myself into work. I took every difficult case, every surgery no one else wanted. I thought if I could save enough people it would balance the scale, but it does not work that way. The ones you lose stay with you forever. Is that why you stopped? The accident. He nodded slowly. I was exhausted, depleted. I made a mistake during a routine procedure. My hand slipped. The patient survived, but my career did not. The medical board ruled it fatigue and loss of fine motor control. They suspended my license. A month later, my wife left. She said I had already left long before, that I had been gone since the day I lost my first patient. Tessa wiped her eyes. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. Have I not earned it? She thought about that question, about blame and forgiveness, about the impossible burden of trying to save everyone. No, she said finally. You were human. You did everything you could. Melody's death was not your fault, just as your wife leaving was not your fault. Just as the accident was your body telling you it could not sustain what you were doing to it. You do not hate me? I should, Tessa whispered. Part of me wants to, but I have spent 6 weeks watching you try to heal, watching you learn to be a father again, seeing you fight for every small piece of progress. You are not the surgeon who lost my sister. You are the man who has been trying to forgive himself for being human. Nathan looked at her with such raw vulnerability that it broke something open in her chest. I do not know how to forgive myself. Then let me help you, the same way you let me help with your hand. Choosing to stay, the following days were difficult. They moved around each other carefully, processing the revelation. Oliver sensed the tension and grew quieter, watching them with worried eyes. Dr. Hayes visited, and Tessa told her everything. The older woman listened without judgment. Will you leave? Victoria asked. Tessa looked out at the city, at the rain that never seemed to stop, at the reflection of herself in the glass. I thought about it, but leaving would not change the past. Melody is still gone. Nathan still carries his guilt. Running from this does not honor her memory or help him heal. And your feelings for him? Tessa had not said it aloud before, but the truth had been growing quietly for weeks. I care about him. More than I should, maybe. But that does not make it wrong. No, Victoria agreed. It makes it complicated. But the best things usually are. That evening, Tessa found Nathan on the balcony, something he rarely did. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and crisp. She joined him, standing close but not touching. I have been thinking about what you said, Nathan began. About forgiveness? I do not know if I can let go of the guilt entirely, but perhaps I can learn to live with it differently. How? By honoring the people I lost through how I live now, by being present for Oliver, by finishing the medical research I abandoned, by accepting help from people who offer it freely. He turned to face her fully, and by being honest about what I feel, Tessa's heart raced. What do you feel? That you are the strongest person I have ever met. That you walked into my life when I had given up on connection and reminded me why it matters. That despite every reason you have to hate me, you chose compassion instead. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, his left hand gently cupped her face. His right hand, still trembling but improving, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. You are too much for me, she whispered, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Then I will go slowly, he promised. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, filled with the weight of everything they had survived to reach this moment. When they pulled apart, both were crying, but this time the tears felt like release rather than pain. New beginnings 3 months later, the penthouse had transformed completely. Oliver's laughter echoed through the halls. Nathan's research had resumed, and he was consulting on difficult cases, teaching younger surgeons, finding new ways to contribute to medicine. His hand had regained much of its function through persistent therapy, and Tessa suspected through having reasons to heal beyond himself. Tessa had enrolled in classes to finish her nursing degree, something she had abandoned after Melody's death. Nathan supported her completely, often studying alongside her in the evenings while Oliver drew at the coffee table. One night, as they sat together watching the city lights, Oliver climbed into Tessa's lap, something he did more frequently now. He still rarely spoke, but his silence had become comfortable rather than concerning. "Tessa," he said suddenly, his voice small but clear. Both adults froze. It was the first word he had spoken in nearly 8 months. "Yes, sweetheart," she managed. "Are you going to stay?" She looked at Nathan, whose eyes were bright with emotion, then back at the boy, who had somehow become hers too. "Yes, Oliver, I am going to stay. Forever." She felt Nathan's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing. "For as long as you will have me?" Oliver smiled content and returned his attention to his drawing. Nathan leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." "Thank you for teaching me that healing does not mean forgetting," she replied. "It means learning to carry the past without letting it crush you." Outside, the rain began again, gentle and familiar. But inside the glass tower, 3 people who had been lost in their own ways had found each other. The ghosts would always be there. Melody and Nathan's lost patience, and the version of himself he used to be. But they no longer haunted. They simply reminded them of how precious and fragile life was, and how important it was to hold on to the people who made survival feel like living. Nathan pulled Tessa closer, and she rested her head against his shoulder. Slowly, he promised again, "We will take this slowly." "Slowly is perfect," she agreed. And in that moment, surrounded by glass and rain, and the quiet breathing of a child, finally at peace, slowly felt like everything they needed.